I want to share with you what we think we've learned from 33 years of systematic surveys in Houston, Texas. Back in 1982, it fell to my lot to teach a research methods class to sociology majors at Rice. Houston was booming. 1 million people had moved into Harris County between 1970 and 1982. 1 million, coming at the rate of 1,380 people a week, brought about by the tenfold increase in the value of oil. This was a one-company town. 82% of all the jobs in Houston were tied into the oil business. And the price of a barrel of oil went from $3.20 in 1970 to $32.50 by 1980. Houston's prime industrial products increased tenfold in value with no less in world demand. Boom town America. It was also a city world famous for having imposed the least amount of controls on development of any city in the Western world. So what if it smells? It's a smell of money. Come on down. Growing concerns about what kind of city we're building with traffic and pollution and crime, but growing, who cares, we're booming. One-time survey, a friend of mine started a new survey organization, and we had a wonderful group of students to sort of, let's see if we can measure how people are balancing this incredible growth with growing concerns about what kind of city are we building. A one-time survey, never occurred to us to do it again. 2 months later, the oil boom collapsed. Houston went into, suddenly the price of oil had been at $32.50, fell out at $28 by the end of 1983, but Houston had been building and borrowing on the basis of $50 oil, and 100,000 jobs were lost in Houston by the end of 1983. We said, my gosh, we better do this survey again. And for 34 years, my students and I have been taking a representative random sample of Harris County residents, asking people identical questions over the years. How do you see the world? What is happening in your life? And we have sat back and watched the world change. Houston went into major recession and then recovered into a restructured economy and a demographic revolution. And I want to focus especially on the demographic revolution. Why here? Why now? What does this mean for us as we build the America of the 21st century? Houston turns out to be at the forefront of the transformations that are occurring across all of America, nowhere more clearly seen or more sharply articulated than in Houston, Texas. So this is the new economy. The 30 years after World War II, the United States emerged from that war in 1946 as the sole economic power on the planet. All of our potential competitors were decimated by the war experience. America was untouched by the war. We came back triumphant. Rosie the Riveter, who'd been doing all the work while the men were out in the armies, went back into the homes. They postponed having children, and the average American woman between 1946 and 1964 gave birth to 3.6 children on average. And part of it was because of this tremendous economic growth. The poorest 20% of American families more than doubled their incomes in the 30 years after World War II. The average American man, whatever his job was, doubled his income, making more money every year between 1950 and 1970. Women were at home making 3.6 children. The baby boom was launched upon the land, preceded and followed by baby bust generations. So for 60 or 76 million babies moving along through that system, demographers talk about it like a pig being swallowed by a python. Not very healthy either for the pig or the python. The leading edge of those 76 million babies turned 69 this year. And by 2030, the youngest of those 76 million will have turned 65. And the epic transformation of our time in America is the movement off into the sunset of overwhelmingly Anglo baby boomers replaced by a very different population in the 21st century. This is the last 30 years. This is the first 30 years after World War II. Here is the last 30 years when all the benefits of economic growth have gone to the richest 5%, most of that to the richest 1%. In a striking redistribution of earnings out of the hands of the poor and the middle class into the hands of the rich and the super rich. The poorest 20% of American families are poorer today than they were 30 years ago. The bottom 60% of American families have basically stagnated or gone down in income in the last 30 years, and all the benefits have gone to the richest 5%. It's a whole bunch of what happened, why did it change? Very quickly, two big phenomena. One is globalization. Fareed Zakaria said it best in his book, The Post-American World. What we're dealing with in the world today is not the decline of the West. The West is not declining. It's not the decline of the West, it's the rise of the rest. We are in a global economy. Companies can produce goods now everywhere, sell them anywhere. If you are doing a job that I could train a third world worker to do, and I pay that third world worker $10 a day to do that job, I'm not going to pay you $10 an hour. And if you are doing a job that I can program a computer to do, I'm going to replace your job with an intelligent machine. We are suddenly in a new world where education has become absolutely critical to a person's ability to earn enough money to support a family in the new global knowledge economy of the 21st century. And I tell people, the most important institution of higher education in Houston is not Rice University, wonderful and important as Rice is, it's the community college system. That's where we take kids coming out of high school with no skills and connect them, to the extent we do, with the technical jobs that are available to people in the 21st century. And we ask people in our surveys, in today's economy, is it necessary to get an education beyond high school, or are there many ways to succeed with no more than a high school diploma? And 3/4 of all Houstonians said you've got to get education beyond high school. That recognition that 14 years of education is now the minimum requirement in this new economy. And I fight a losing battle with people who say, if only those Latinos and African Americans valued education the way the Asians and the Anglos do, there would be no problem, and we'd get all the education we need. So I can break it into the 4 different ethnic communities, and here's what you find. Blacks and Hispanics, even more than Asians and more than Anglos, understand the critical importance of education. If they're not getting that education, it is demonstrably not because they don't value the education or understand its importance. It's because of poverty. Concentrated poverty in cities like Houston and countries like America that have isolated the poor in communities where the access to the education that's needed is unavailable. The most critical thing, just very quickly, is preschool education, I'm convinced. The moment of truth in education, they tell me, is 3rd grade reading. If you're not reading at 3rd grade level in 3rd grade, you are 4 times more likely to drop out of high school. And the single most powerful predictor whether you can read at 3rd grade level is, did you start kindergarten ready to learn to read? And folks from poor families start kindergarten 1.5 to 2 years behind kids from wealthy families. They never catch up. Critical importance of investing in education. The only way to improve the lot of the poor in the new economy of the 21st century is not by cutting taxes on the rich, not by accelerating economic growth. The only way to improve the lot of the poor is to invest in their skills. Education is the critical determinant today. So theme number 1 in our surveys is the growing inequalities across America, particularly clear in Houston, predicated above all else on access to quality education. Theme number 2 is what I want to talk about, which is tied into this remarkable, fundamental, irreversible transformation in the ethnic composition of the Houston, the Texas, and the American population. Why here? Why now? Here's a quick reminder of the history of America, the number of immigrants coming to this country in each of the decades from the 1820s through the 2000s. The big story is between 1492 and 1965. 82% of all the human beings on the face of this earth who came to American shores came from Europe. Another 12% were Africans brought here as slaves to serve the Europeans, and there was a handful of Chinese and Japanese working as farmers and laborers in California and Hawaii. This nation, throughout all of its history, was an amalgam of European nationalities, deliberately so. In the last 40, you can see that we were a nation of immigrants, and between 1890 and 1914, 15.9 million immigrants came into this country, coming from Europe, but not coming from Northern Europe, coming from Southern and Eastern Europe, and they weren't Protestants, they were Catholics and Jews, and they had no history of democracy, and they're coming to take our jobs and destroy our country. We've got to stop them. And in 1924, Congress enacted this incredible act that said, from now on, you can come here in direct proportion to which your ethnicity and nationality was represented in the census of 1890. It used a new science of psychology and the IQ test to declare in the act, science has proven that there are 3 subspecies of the white race. The Nordics, who are biologically and intellectually superior to the Alpines, who in turn are superior to the Mediterraneans, and all of them are superior to the Jews and the Asians. And the law codified the Chinese Exclusion Act of California in 1882, the Gentleman's Agreement of Japan in 1906, to declare in the act, Asians are an inferior subspecies of humanity, ineligible from ever becoming American citizens, and Asians were banned entirely from coming to America. Isn't that incredible? This is us speaking out of the racist world of America in the 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s. Immigration plummets. That's, of course, the Great Depression in the 1930s. Do we really want to stop immigration, engineer a Great Depression? 28% unemployment, people stopped going. But basically, immigration we thought was a thing of the past. The law could not survive, of course, the shifts of consciousness with the civil rights movements, Kennedy's assassination, and in 1965, Congress changed the law. Said, okay, we used to be a racist nation. We're not racist anymore. We'll give every country recognized by the UN 20,000 visas a year, regardless of their ethnicity, so get off my back, we're not racist, but we're going to continue the hallmark of American immigration policy, which is family reunification. So if you're related to someone who's already here, you can come to the head of the line. Therefore, said Congress, first of all, we think immigration has ended, but anyway, nothing's going to change because we're going to give preference to people who are related to those who are already here. Then it added another provision. It said, well, if you're a professional of exceptional ability, or if you have skills that are possibly needed in the short supply, you too can come to the head of the line. And Congress, in its debates in the 1950s and early 60s about this Hart-Celler Act of 1965, in the debates, Congress was saying, we need to open the door for some more British doctors, some more German engineers. It never occurred to anyone that there were going to be African doctors, Indian engineers, Chinese computer programmers who would be able for the first time in the 20th century to come to America. The law was changed in 1965, so we call one of the great inadvertent acts that the US Congress has ever passed, in a body, of course, known for its inadvertent acts and its unintended consequences. The world changed. We become a nation of immigrants again, more than ever before in American history. And in the 1960s, 3.5 million immigrants came to this country. Only 38% were from Europe. In the 1970s, 5 million came. Only 18% were Europeans. 1980s, 90s, and 2000s, about 10 million immigrants per decade have been coming into America. 88% coming from Asia, Latin America, Africa, and the Caribbean. And the United States, throughout all of our history, been an amalgam of European nationalities, is rapidly becoming a microcosm of the world. The first nation in history that can say we are a free people and we come from everywhere. It's a remarkable change. In the same moment as the American economy is becoming fully integrated in a single global world economic system, America, a microcosm of the world, totally inadvertently, again, no one expected this. Immigration is network driven, so it's not happening at the same rate all across the country. There are two cities, Los Angeles and New York, that are the great immigration capitals of America. Still today, about 1/3 of all the foreign-born residents in the United States live in or around those two great cities, followed by lesser magnet gateway cities, Miami, San Francisco, Chicago, Houston. Followed right after Houston by San Diego, Washington, D.C., Dallas, Boston, Atlanta, spreading out to every city and town across America. No city has been transformed as fully, as completely, as suddenly, as irreversibly as Houston, Texas. The story of Houston is that throughout all of our history, this was a biracial southern city, dominated and controlled in an automatic, taken-for-granted way by white men. In the space of the last 30 years, Houston has become the single most ethnically diverse major metropolitan area in the country. Here are the census figures for the 3 decades during the oil boom years. There was our biracial world. In 1970, there were 1960, there were 1.243 million people living in Harris County, Texas. 74% of us were Anglos, 20% African Americans, just 6% Hispanics, less than 0.5% were Asians. Oil boom years, it was Anglos pouring into Houston. By 1980, Houston became the 4th largest city in America, still an overwhelmingly Anglo city. Then came the oil bust. And after 1982, 32 years ago, the Anglo population of Harris County stopped growing. And all the growth of this, the most rapidly growing city in America, has been the influx of African Americans, Latinos, and Asians. And here are the last 3 decades. Anglo population has dropped. African American population has grown by about 20% per decade, keeping pace with the population as a whole, surging populations of Latinos and Asians, and by 2010, Harris County was now 41% Latino, 33% Anglo, 18% African American, 8% Asian. 2 big things to point to here. Had Houston not been one of the great magnets for the new immigration of the last 30 years, this city would have lost population. Houston would have had the same fate as other major American cities across the country that are losing their status as major cities, because for one reason or another, they have not grown in the last 30 years and have not become magnets for the new immigration. Philadelphia, Baltimore, Pittsburgh, St. Louis, Detroit, Cleveland, Cincinnati, Buffalo. Instead, Houston's one of the most rapidly growing cities in America, tremendous entrepreneurial economy, last thing to go into recession, first one to come out, purely because of the tremendous energy, vitality, commitment to hard work of immigrants pouring into the city from Asia, Latin America, Africa, and the Caribbean. No city has benefited more from immigration than Houston, Texas. And it's ironic but not surprising to see anti-immigrant attitudes in Houston when you think of how radically different the story would have been had Houston been like Philadelphia, as we were in 1980, when Philadelphia stopped growing and Houston became this great magnet for the new immigration of the 21st century. And the other point is that Houston has a more even distribution among the 4 great communities of America than any of the other multi-ethnic melting pot cities. There are very few Asians in Miami, there are very few Hispanics in San Francisco, there are very few African Americans in Los Angeles. This is where the 4 communities meet in greater balance, greater equality, all of us minorities. All of us called on now to build something new under the sun, a truly successful, inclusive, equitable, multi-ethnic society that will be Houston and Texas and America in the 21st century. Here's another way to envision this. This is Harris County in 1980. 293 census tracts in Harris County. In blue are all the census tracts in 1980 that were majority Anglo. In red are the census tracts majority African American. That's the 3rd Ward and the 5th Ward. Along the ship channel was what we call the Segundo Barrio, where the Latinos were, and a very few places around the Beltway in that olive color with no majority. Okay, so that's Harris County in 1980. Here's Harris County in 1990. Here's Harris County in 2000. Here's Harris County today. Isn't that incredible? With no one having planned this, Houston finds itself at the forefront of the demographic transformation that is occurring across all of America. I tell you, no one consulted with me before all these people came. Here they are. This is Houston's destiny, is to be the place where the American future is going to be worked out. And I want to show 2 other last things and I'm going to stop. But here it's not only numbers, it's also ages, right? So here I got babies on the left and old folks on the right. And here are 12 different age categories as of 2012 in Harris County, Texas. And here is where, somewhat to my chagrin, are the Anglos. Welcome to the baby boom, right? There are the 76 million Anglo babies heading rapidly into retirement. At each younger age group, the percentage of Anglos plummets. The percentage of African Americans, Asians, and above all Latinos surges. And here's where everybody else is in terms of age. So everybody under the age of 20 in Harris County, Texas today, 51% are Latinos, 19% are African Americans, 9% are Asians, 22% are Anglos. So I tell people 2 things you can say. Number 1, it is a safe, 70% of everybody in Harris County under the age of 20 is African American and Latino. The 2 groups overwhelmingly the most likely to be living in poverty. We know what poverty does to your ability to succeed in the public schools. And it is a safe statement to make that if Houston's African American and Latino young people are unprepared to succeed in the global knowledge economy of the 21st century, it is hard to envision a prosperous future for Houston. That is who we are and will be as the 21st century unfolds. And the other point to make is that this is a done deal. Close the borders, build your fence. Not another immigrant ever again will be allowed to come to these shores. We're going to seal off America from the rest of the world. 60-year-old Anglos are not going to be making a whole lot more babies. I tell everybody we'll do the best we can. We'll work on it every chance we get. You can go to the bank on this. No force in the world is going to stop Houston or Texas or America from becoming more Latino, more African American, more Asian, and less Anglo as the 21st century unfolds. Nothing in the world can stop that. So the only question we've been given is, okay, how do we make this work? How do we ensure that this ethnic diversity becomes a tremendous asset that it can be for Houston and America, and make sure it doesn't end up tearing us apart and becoming a major liability, reducing rather than enhancing our competitiveness in the global economy? I just want to show you very quickly, this is Houston, here is Texas. Same kind of pattern here. There are the Anglos in Texas. Here's the rest of us. Very similar to Houston. Texas is about 2 years behind Houston, Texas, and California, the 2 largest states in the union, both of which have already made that massive leap into becoming a microcosm of the world as opposed to European nationalities. Here's America as a whole, still an Anglo country. There are the Anglos in America in 2012, the same pattern, however, right, of the older folks are disproportionately Anglo, younger folks not. Here's where everybody else is in 2012, and the census actually announced a year after this that all of their counts tell them that across all of America, of everybody in this country who is under the age of 5, the majority are now African American, Latino, and Asian. And then because of those damn actuarial tables, the census says, we can show you what America will look like in 2050, assuming no more immigration, just on the basis of actuarial tables of life expectancies and so on. And here's the picture of America in 2050. And this is, in essence, Houston today. So it is really fair to say how Houston navigates this transition, with what kind of wisdom, sensitivity, determination to build a truly successful multi-ethnic society will have enormous significance, not just for the Houston future, but for the American future. This is where the American future is going to be worked out. It's what makes what all of us are dealing with in today's world and thinking about in terms of our city of transcendent importance, because if Houston can't do this, it's hard to see other Miami or San Francisco or Chicago doing it. And if we can do it, we can be a model for what all of America will be as this inevitable transformation continues into the 21st century. Thank you all very much. Great pleasure to be here. Thank you.